Do our best.
And then, you know, just casual conversation. It's, you know, it's intended to be very relaxed and just kind of picking your brain on what your experience has been, you know, what the appeal has been, what you see as opportunity for Walgreens, what you see as opportunity for other retailers, you know, that kind of stuff, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
if there was anything in those questions that you're concerned about or whatever, just let me know. And if you're good, then we'll just dive into it.
Yeah.
So,
I think we're good.
okay. All right. So we'll start with the core stuff, right? So, you know, if I said, Bill, why, you know, why Alto, what was it about, you know, their value proposition that, you know, that got them in the door, and what is it that you're seeing as far as wanting to expand them out into other stores?
Yeah, it's so I'd say the why was pretty simple for me. Once I still remember when we met with Carl the first time, and he kind of laid out what the solution was. It was a solution that no one that I was aware of in the marketplace had thought of or was providing. And what it did for me is, as I was listening to Carl explain it to us, it reminded me of an experience I had when I first joined loss prevention. So this is, gosh, 13 years ago. First thing I did, because I didn't come from the stores, I was, you know, I was just, you know, nobody, right? Like I didn't know how any of this stuff worked, right? So I get into this loss prevention role, and it's super focused on the operations of the business, which I shouldn't say I didn't know anything. I was teaching operations before that, which is hilarious. I was teaching store managers to become store managers. I'd never worked in a store. And so first thing I did was work at a store. So I could actually see what it felt like to be a store team member. And I lived in the city at the time in Chicago. And I worked in the store as an assistant manager for like 6 weeks. So it was totally a crash course in what retail operations is like. And one of the things that kept coming up all the time, because we were in the city, so we were a high shrink store, high volume too. We would catch shoplifters all the time. And, you know, back then we were catching shoplifters. And so we would catch them, and sometimes the police would come. And if they did, the complaint that always came up was that somebody's going to have to go to court now. And that's a big pain, and we don't have time for this. And the store manager would have to be the one typically to go, because then he'd leave the assistant, the true assistant. You know, I was just shadowing this guy. And so as Carl was explaining it to me, it reminded me of that. I was like, yeah, how many times do you think we don't go to court simply because we can't, especially in our urban areas. This stuff happens all the time. So we don't have time for that. And then we get there, and, you know, does anything even happen half the time? You know, the anecdotal feedback from the managers was, no, not a lot really happens. And so I thought, this is interesting, because I knew the why behind why we weren't going to court, because we just didn't have the time. The something not happening was something I learned more over time. And that was the other pole in the tent, if you will, that I thought also had a really good idea around, which was, just because you got caught for one thing doesn't mean that you can't get prosecuted for all of the things if we know what those are. And so that, I thought, was a huge win for us, because now you're saving me my store team members' time. Check, that's huge. And you're helping me get a more likely prosecution out of an incident that happened in one of my stores. Check. And then my favorite, the third pole, is you've created a deterrent solution. This is the catching part is important to the solution, but the deterrence that the solution provides, the marketing, the signage, all of that, it made perfect sense to me. It was, let's scream from the mountaintops that we are doing this. Don't mess with us, because we have to. You know, back then we started in LA, and we were getting clobbered in LA. You know, you put fixtures up, you know, whatever, nothing worked. It just wasn't working. We needed another layer. We needed to make people afraid. And we weren't getting anything from the police, because they didn't have any time for shoplifting. They were so busy with everything else. And so as we started to get into, and Carl, with his law enforcement background, of course, he was able to speak to this really well around how the relationship building happens. And I flew out to LA with them and had lunch with the LAPD and the leadership of the LAPD, and the director who's still out there, Mike Horgan, was with us, and he pulled me aside and said, I've been trying to get these guys to talk to me he'd only been out there for like 6 months, but he'd been trying to get them to talk to him for months, and he just couldn't get them to even pay attention to him. And now he picks up the phone and calls, and if we pick up the phone at our stores and call, almost every time they're there. because of all the work that we've done. So those were all, what I loved about it was in the past, we were trying to do all those things. And so it was taking our sweat equity to try and get those relationships built, to go to court, to try and build, deterrence. Somebody came to me and said, how about I do all that for you? And it's going to cost you a little money, but last time I checked, you're losing a lot of money. So it's probably going to work itself out. And I said, well, there's only one way we're going to find out. And that was kind of where Alto was at the time too, where they had Albertsons testing at that time, but they were having trouble getting people to try it because there wasn't any proof that it worked in the US. And I didn't understand why everyone was so hesitant, because it's not like theft is different in Latin America than it is in the US. Like if there, the deterrence factor of prosecution and incarceration, I don't think that those things are different across cultures. And so it didn't make sense to me that people didn't believe the success in Latin America just because they hadn't done it yet in the US. So I said, well, let's try it then, because that's the only way we're going to figure this out. So we did. And we went out and met with Albertsons and talked with them. And I don't think that I think they lost their funding in the program, but they were there with us for a while. And it was, the results spoke for themselves. The community, the impact in the community, the relationship with law enforcement, the shrink results, the team member safety, and how the team members felt, all of that stuff. I mean, it was a home run.
That's great. That's great. So based on that, would you say that those are the factors that have led you to go to this expansion?
Yeah, and I failed to say something. The thing that is not the reason that I went with Alto, and in my opinion, I think they talk about this too much when they're trying to market themselves, is not their analytics. The data is super important. The data is what is the engine, right? The data is how we get the information that we can use for prosecution. But I don't need an analytics solution, and in my opinion, most of us don't anymore. Like we're kind of past the age where we need to go buy an analytics solution, because we've all built analytics or already bought analytics solutions. And they early on, and I shared this feedback with the team as well, they were really trying to sell this to me as like a dashboard. And there, you look at all of these analytics. And I finally sat them down with Ray Stukel, who runs my analytics team. And I said, I'd like to introduce you to one of the most world-class analytics teams in loss prevention. And you explain to me why I would care about your dashboard. I don't need one. These guys can run circles around you guys. No offense. Like this is good. And
oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's not a bad product, but this isn't why I'm buying. This isn't what I'm paying for. What I'm paying for is those other three things that I talked about.
You had to introduce the actuarial scientist to the equation. I think that's really fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Like he literally is an actuary.
Yes. I know. I've spoken to him many times.
Yeah, you can tell when you talk to him.
I think you touched on some of it in kind of summary, but let's go into a little more of the detail around what you're seeing as the benefit and the impact, right? I mean, we're talking about hours in the store, as far as availability of people. I'm assuming obviously availability of product if theft is down, and things like that. But let's kind of expound on some of those benefits, operational efficiencies, benefit to the associates, benefit to the customer, benefit to the community, that type of thing.
Yeah. So let's start with the people. So store associates, one, they're far less scared now than they were before, frankly, to go to work. I mean, think about going to work in a retail store and you have to be afraid. It's not like it's a high-paying gig, and so you're going into a retail job and you might actually get hurt while you're there, and not because you fell off a ladder or something.
Right.
Way safer. They feel better. They're more engaged. They do have more time to spend time on what they're best at, which is help the customers and interact with the customers. One, because they're not dealing with shoplifters all the time, but two, when people steal from us, then we're having to manage the inventory so much more, right? We're having to deal with the products much more frequently than we typically would. And then you've got the store leadership has more time now because they're not dealing with this to do what they do best, which is to work with the team members and the customers. We hear when we get solutions like this that are successful in these really tough areas, the store leaders will say, I'm having conversations with my people about things like profit sharing and, like having like actual manager conversations with them. I never had time for that stuff before. That goes a long way for them. Like, I feel like a manager again. I don't feel like a cop running around defending my store in a war zone right now. Customers, same thing. You know, you hear the customer feedback. Now it's a safer feeling shopping environment. They see the signage. The team members also really love the signage, especially now that we've gone into the expansion. We're getting the feedback from the team members about the signage. They love that we're just being so overt and just saying, listen, this is like, we're done messing around here. And that makes them feel really good. The customers feel really good. And they, you know, if I think about the customer outside of them as a retail customer, but a community member, they feel like we're doing something about it. They're so thankful that we're just trying to do something about it. And that bleeds into the law enforcement as well. You know, law enforcement, they're, to their credit, they're not responding, or they're not as engaged prior to this because they do have so much on their plate already. But they are able to find a way to make some time for us when they see us doing something about it. They're seeing us making an investment in the problem and trying to help them, understanding that there's only so much they're going to be able to do. So we're trying to close that gap with them. And with that, you know, that they reciprocate with us. And that's, I think, starting to go a long way. We're starting to feel that. And then, yeah, the product, in-stock conditions better, sales go up, shrink goes down. So we get profit coming in incrementally from two different directions. So financially, it's a great win for us. Absolutely.
Were you able to, in the pilot period that you had, were you able to measure some of that as far as, you know, that, I mean, you had measurable impact on sales and product availability and things like that?
Yeah, because that was really how they built the business case, was through the improvement in shrink in the in-stock.
That's great.
Was it about equal? Was it about equal reduction in shrink and in stock, or increased sales?
I don't know. I'd have to get that for us. I wasn't as close to the measurement when they were executing the pilot, so I'd have to go pull the doc. We have it. I can let you know.
Yeah. Okay. What was the implementation experience like as far as rolling this out initially, and then, you know, and then let's talk about the expansion, but let's start with the initial setup and any kinks, any concerns, anything they could have done better, or that, you know?
I don't think so. This was an area that I was less close to. When my involvement in this was really kind of discovering and then learning more and getting out there, and then once I was convinced we should try it, we actually handed this off to another team for them to execute it. So I was like, I did one of the, hey, I have a new idea and now it's time for you to go do the work moves. And, but I do know that there was, you know, and this always happens, is you don't always land the messaging great the first time. So in LA, getting the stores to kind of get on board with it, you guys know how retailers are, you know, they're skeptical, right? So like, you're gonna do what? Like, how, and that's gonna do what? How is this gonna work? I don't understand. Because it's, even though the flow of it, you know, and what I consider to be the three poles in the tent they're very logical. From an ecosystem perspective, it didn't quite compute for them yet. Now I think that they've gotten a lot better at that, because the feedback we're getting from the implementation, which I'm only getting in fits and starts from Dave Russell, has been positive though. It's been very positive. And there's stories coming out, like, I love the stories that come back where there was a, what's the name for it? It was like a housing association or whatever for a neighborhood nearby one of our stores. And they were making a bunch of noise, and there was an attorney that I think was a part of it, and they were making a bunch of noise in the media, and they're just complaining a lot about our store, which was really a product of the environment that we were in. And also sent in one of their attorneys and held a town hall and heard everybody's feedback, and then shared what we're doing with them and, you know, how we're trying to help with this problem. And it was like a 180 in terms of the relationship with the community. And so things like that are the soft benefits, the tangible benefits that are frankly what I intend to focus on as part of the messaging when I talk to some of the other retailers, which is, you know, this is an investment in our stores, but it's an investment in the community too. And as a community, I think we all need to invest here so that we can really take control of the situation, because if we don't, it's not going to get any better.
Let's stay on that path for a second. How would you describe Alto to another retailer? So I meet you at RELA or NRF or something, and I'm like, Bill, I understand you guys work with this Alto. What are they all about? What is it that they do for Walgreens?
Yeah, if I headlined it, I would say they're helping us prosecute our shoplifters much more frequently than we did before, and reducing our shrink. and making our stores safer. And then as we get into it, I would lay out, because then of course the question would be, well, how do they do that? Well, here's how they do it. We are apprehending shoplifters. We're using a third party to do so. You might, you retailer A, you might have somebody in store to do that. But if we apprehend them and get their information, that's going into a repository that we can now use with Alto for when that person shows up in court. And the story that I always tell is they had one of their attorneys, this was told to me when I went out there for the 20-store pilot to LA. One of their attorneys showed up for a guy that got caught in our store for stealing, and he stole like whatever, it was like $700 worth of stuff. So it didn't cross the threshold, first of all. And they were describing the courtroom to me, right? And so it's just a long table, like a party-sized table with just files on it, just tons of them. And each one of those are case files, right? And the prosecutors pulling them off and going through it. And, each one of them were basically, pretty small level crimes. And so people were getting slapped on the hand and sent on their way. They got to the guy that our Alto attorney was there for. And even though in the file, there was a history, this attorney, because they're so overwhelmed, is focusing on the one incident and is about to give the guy a slap on the wrist. And then the Alto attorney brings in 17 other incidences that we had records of this person and said, I don't know how we're going to send this guy back out on the street. I mean, he's never going to stop. Look at his history here. And the prosecutor, of course, was like, oh, geez, I didn't realize that. And then our Alto attorney was able to bring all of that information forward, and I forget what he was sentenced to, but he got a pretty good sentence. And then what I love about that is then that person gets informed. You just got thrown in jail because you stole from somebody who's a part of the Alto Alliance. And here's, by the way, here's a leaflet for you that you can take so that you can learn what that looks like. And so now they've got the logo in their mind. They're doing that kind of messaging in the community. We sign our stores, and it's like we have a force field around the store. Ultimately, that's our goal. And so my message to other retailers is the way that this works, though, is it's totally the more the merrier solution. The more of us that use it, the more people we catch, the more information we put into this repository, the more likely we are to get people thrown in jail more frequently and faster if more of us are doing this. And so we all, to your point earlier, we all win if we do this. And if you were worried that it doesn't work, we're doing it in 500 stores now, and they don't let me spend money on stuff that doesn't work. So when we retailers go
There's
bigger,
the tagline.
Yeah.
They stop giving me money when I spend it on things that don't work.
That's fantastic. Well, and this really is a more the merrier type of thing, right? It's not a competitive edge like, oh, we're going to have this special shelf, or we're going to have this special tag, or, and they're not going to have it next door to us, so this is more of a, hey, let's all join hands together and make that ring around the neighborhood.
This is a retail community call to action.
Yeah.
Is the way that I think about it. It really is. Yeah, we've got to build this force field around our retail community and our community that we're servicing.
Right.
To try and help, and what I like about that is before we didn't really feel like we had a way to do that. And to quote The Mandalorian, if you watch, this is the way.
Didn't say it properly, but yes.
Yeah, I know. Trademarks. I got to be careful.
Yeah, exactly.
It's being recorded.
Excuse me. So the awareness of Alto within Walgreens now. So obviously, this started kind of in your world. How far up the chain, down the chain, and across the chain does it go that this is, people understand what Alto is, and how easy was that to sell and to expand on?
The selling part of it was easy because the financials were there, frankly. The awareness of the solution is something that I'm actually working on right now, internally, I mean. So I'm presenting to our entire government relations department next Wednesday to share with them what this is and why we're doing it. And I'm doing it, one, to educate them, because they've been helping us a ton. We've been working with them a ton on the legislation that we're aiming at Amazon to get them to be more deliberate with how they vet their sellers, so they stop selling all of our stolen stuff. So we have a really good relationship with them. And I wanted to explain it to them because A, they're interested, but B, I need them to be a mouthpiece for us, both internally, but they have relationships with all of the other retail government relations departments. And so they're going to go and talk to all their friends too, and explain to them what we're doing at Walgreens. And so that's really my goal here. The senior leadership is aware, but probably not as aware as they are of some of the other programs that we're doing that have very high level awareness. I think that's because it's not as, what's the word? It's not quite as overt as some of the other things that we're doing. So I'll give you an example. One of the other programs that I head up is the program where we're putting uniformed police officers in the stores. We're just posting them at the front of the store, and we're stationing them there as a deterrent. And we unlock the entire store. So we take all of the product protection out, we just put a cop there. And we're improving sales, and our shrink is going down like crazy in the stores where we do it. These are like worst of the worst. They are aware of that program because they're like, one, it's super expensive. So they have to be aware of it because they have to approve it to spend that much money.
Right.
But two, that's something that in their mind makes really obvious sense. Oh, okay, we're putting a cop in the store and then bad things stop happening. Makes sense.
Right.
This one, we've got a little more work to do on the awareness. Now that we're in 500 locations and we're in 5 cities, the awareness amongst the operators is increasing, and that's what will bring the awareness up to the senior level as well, because you'll start to hear from those regional vice presidents more and more as this starts to work.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Talk about Alto and compared to other solution providers. And probably twofold. One would be, what do you see as their competition? And two, just in the way that they work with Walgreens and they manage and they operate and so forth, as compared to some of the other relationships that you have with some of the other vendors.
So I think in terms of who's their competition, probably the only thing I would compare this to in terms of deterrence factor is this police program I just talked to you about. I don't really think that there's anything else that is in competition with this, because I don't think of our traditional solutions like product protection as in competition, because that's kind of in collaboration with this. I don't think of our third-party services as in competition, because we're actually leveraging them to light this up. I think that this, I think it's a solution that is really targeting the ecosystem. I think that's unique. And so it's really a solution that is more likely to be able to bolt onto. In fact, the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to put body cameras on our SRTs so that we can capture video. And I think we're going to test them in the stores too. And I'm going to target the Alto stores, because what better way for us to get even more identity information from offenders that we might not get their actual information in the moment. But if I can send a video of them to the police and they know who they are, great, then we can put that in the system. You know, if our team members have video of it happening, great. They're having, quick aside, they're doing this in the UK. Boots actually is doing it, but Tesco, Boots, Asda, all the European retailers are doing it. They're seeing a reduction in violent incidences from anywhere from 40 to 70% in the stores where they're doing it. Tesco is going to 1,000 stores right now, and they're on a path to go chain wide with the solution. Asda's all of their stores. So my point is, I think this solution, because it's not a thing, it's more of a movement, I think it's got the capability of having other things work with it versus compete with it. In terms of the relationship with the team, but as I said, while we were piloting, I was kind of out of the weeds for the most part. So I would be in a couple of update meetings here and there, but I wasn't really in contact with them too much, although, Kyle and I would stay in touch, but their support, from my view, has been great. I think that they were great partners in the beginning. I thought that they were, I was really impressed, frankly, by and this was necessary at the time, but I was really impressed by the tenacity of the team. They were, because they were fighting an uphill battle, and they needed somebody to jump in and help them, and that's really what I saw there was people that they had a good idea. They were trying to help. They knew it would work because they'd proven it, and they just couldn't get people to believe them that it would work. And and it's like one of those, it's like when you're trying to get a job and they're like, well, you don't have the right experience for this job. It's like, well, how to get the experience if I'm not in the job, right? Well, how do I prove that this works if you don't try it, And it was, maybe it's because my wife's from Colombia, and I was like, I don't understand, like, crime is crime. What's the difference here? I've been there. And so maybe it didn't make sense to me for that reason, but they were great partners, and they have been great partners. I think it's been a really good experience.
That's excellent. Excellent. Any unforeseen benefits, anything that you didn't expect coming out of this that has kind of been a nice surprise?
The community reaction is huge for us. There's a huge, and we're probably not capturing and leveraging enough of it, frankly. There's a big PR benefit to us. And I mean that kind of in two ways. One, we're actually helping and we can see that. It's showing up in a way that we can actually observe it. But then two, for the company, there's an opportunity for us to take some credit for that and to start to talk about that a little bit more openly. Now that we're in a bigger group of stores in multiple cities, it'll make more sense for us to do that, which is part of the reason I'm trying to light up our government relations team, so that they not only are talking to the GR folks, but they very often meet with the local leaders of these different cities, you know, whether it's the mayor of Chicago, New York, San Fran, whatever. So this is just another tool in their toolbox as they're talking about, here's what we're doing, so that when we go in there with our list of things we're doing, when we have the ask, it's a little easier for us to put the ask on the table and have a higher likelihood of getting a yes back from the local leaders.
Okay.
But the community reaction's been really positive and stronger than I was really expecting. It wasn't something that was as much on my radar when we were thinking about testing it. It was really just about getting the shoplifting to stop. So I underestimated that.
Would you put that as sort of equal or higher or lower from the shoplifting perspective, the community perspective? If you were recommending this to other retailers, what would be that key list of things that you would say, look, here's why you got to do this, bang, bang, bang?
Yep, team member safety, number one, always. Positive impact on the community, our customers, they're safer, they're happier, and then after that, you're going to make some more money. That's, at the end of the day, everybody's going to be safer, happier, more engaged, and we also get to make a little bit more money. Check, check, check.
Perfect. So obviously we got a push not to prosecute and retail theft going on in a lot of places. How do you think this Alto approach aligns with that?
I think what this does is I think it actually helps us work around that, because the push to not prosecute retail theft, right, it's focused on what is thought to be the low level retail theft. Well, what this does is it gives us a way to come in with examples that make the case for why this prosecution should happen. Fine, you don't want to do that person who only stole $500. That's your deal. You got the threshold. That's fine. This gives us a way to work around that and come over the top of those thresholds and come over the top of that kind of philosophy that you're seeing out there. It doesn't mean that we're going to be able to prosecute everybody all the time. We're still, I'm realistic about it. We're going to lose sometimes, but it's kind of like building a business case. And if you make it really hard to say no, then usually you get a yes.
Right. There you go. All right, we touched on analytics a bit, and it sounds like if we look at what they have for analytics versus what you guys already had, because you guys do have a pretty amazing analytics program to begin with, so there's probably nothing new that was brought to you from them or anything like that, or nothing. Is there anything that you're seeing now that you weren't seeing before, or is there anything that they have highlighted that is enabled you guys, even with your own analytics, to focus and see more that you weren't seeing before, just based on the program itself?
No, I think probably the one thing I will say is it validated what we already thought from our analytics. So they were seeing the same stuff that we were seeing, right? And so if I'm looking at all of our product movements happening, we have a perception of what our targeted products are and where we're having the bigger issues, and that's driven by where the losses are coming from. We can see that come through in the incidents by tracking, okay, what are the products that they're stealing when we actually do have the apprehensions and capture that information. So that was validation for us, which is helpful. It's nice to get, a secondary source to tell you, yeah, your analytics are right. You guys are on the money here.
Okay. Just want to take a couple notes there. So what do you think? What do you think's missing? If you could change something about the program, the platform, the process, the company, let's look at a couple of those. From your perspective, what do you see is missing?
If I had my druthers, one of the things that if I'm using my kind of process improvement brain, one of the things that feels disconnected to me is that I'm going to another company to get my shoplifting response team resources to support my Alto program. If Alto came to me and said, and we had a solution for this, so it was fine. But if we're talking about a more complete solution, if Alto had come to me and said, I'm going to do all these things that we've already discussed, and by the way, the people that are doing the apprehensions are our people too, because we have teams. So that's all part of the package. We'll manage all of it for you so that you don't have to worry about it. That would be easier. We have to manage the SRTs separately, so the local team is managing those SRTs and making sure that we get them in the right stores based on the Alto store footprint. But if we could consolidate that, if Alto was able to consolidate that, I think that would be valuable to retailers.
Okay. That's
managing a program like that is it's time consuming for us. I'll give you an example. This uniform police program, where I can't say who yet, but we hired a company to manage that program for us so that we don't have to worry about scheduling and paying and any of that stuff. And, making sure they show up, attendance, all of that. We're going to pay a fee to this company and they're going to take care of all of it for me nationwide. And so that takes a lot of time consuming work off my plate. Same thing with this. I think if Alto had something like that, that could be valuable to retailers. Probably not all retailers. Some retailers might say, I already have a solution for that, so I don't need that. I just want the other part of your solution.
Right.
But it could be another tool in the toolbox.
Right. Okay.
Otherwise, I don't think that there's anything wrong with the dashboarding. I think if there's customers that have a less mature analytics program, that might be more valuable to them. And there certainly are retailers that will be less mature in that space. So I think they're doing a nice job on their dashboard. And the last time I looked at it, so I think that's fine, and their support is great.
Okay.
In our conversation with Tyler yesterday, one of the things that he shared with us was that the customer response has been positive. And you briefly mentioned that. Can you go into any of the additional detail? He had shared that, hearing back from the receipts and such, that there was a reasonable percentage uptick in that positivity, which obviously, anytime you can measure something is good. Was that also a surprise? Not just the community involvement, but the customer response?
Yeah, the overtness of the customer response has been surprising because it's in some ways, I think it brought us at the support center closer to the customer because we didn't realize how they felt because they weren't talking to us as much about how they were feeling in terms of not feeling safe, in terms of the community is going, it's going to hell. That was the things that they were feeling that they weren't really telling us. When they saw us do something though, they shared all of that as part of their positive feedback. Like, this is how I felt before. And now I see you guys doing something. I can come in here and shop normal. Instead of, before COVID, of course, I can shop normal instead of trying to get in and out as fast as possible before something bad happens in here. And so I think that was certainly stronger and more vocal than we were anticipating, definitely. I was expecting to hear from the team members, but I didn't think, and obviously we get most of this feedback from the local team when they hear from the customers directly. But if our folks are in the store, Alto's people are in the store, the customers come right up to them and talk to them about it and thank them for doing something about it.
Well,
they're just, you forget about, we talk about sales and we talk about shrink so much that you forget that they're just people and they're scared, because these guys are scared of nothing. And so we had to give them something to be scared of.
That's great. I want you to put on an Alto hat for a second. Knowing what you know about the company, if I was to say, okay, if you're Alto, how should you describe yourself to get the, to pique the interest? What do you want to hear from them walking up to you to say, hi, Bill, I understand you work for Walgreens. I'm with Alto. Where should they go with that conversation?
Hold on, sorry guys. Dog was trying to go outside.
I saw him running away. I was like, oh, that's not good. If you weren't for Alto, he just runs.
If I was Alto, my basic pitch would be, I'm going to reduce shoplifting and improve your shrink by helping you prosecute shoplifters more frequently. And that would elicit, obviously the how. And that's where they can go into, and where we're deployed, we have a team of attorneys that is using a database that has offender information in it that allows us to bring forward every offense of a shoplifter that gets caught in your store, so that we can increase the chances that they'll get prosecuted. If they get prosecuted, they'll know it was because they stole from one of our stores.
Excellent.
Bill, it also sounds like we're talking more about habitual offenders rather than just the average shoplifter that comes in and steals, some cold pills or whatever it might be. That seems to be more where everything that you've talked about is focused, rather than just focusing on those little onesies here and there. Is that more the case?
Yeah, that's true, Jack. I would say that our solutions for those folks are probably more in the vein of our fixturing solutions that we have in place when we have those issues. Because we don't necessarily just deploy fixtures for the habitual high-level shoplifting. We have, like the medium-level fixtures that we'll use for that type of theft too. And so if we're having issues like that, that rise to the need for us to make an investment or deploy a solution, we would use something more like that. I think this is definitely, we're talking about folks that are more habitual, because we're kind of counting on that so that we have multiple instances in their history that we can leverage in court for that prosecution to happen. I think that's
well, that would also mean that your law enforcement people would be more interested too, I would think, rather than going in and dealing with some kids stealing a pack of gum.
Absolutely. Yeah, they know that they're spending their time in a more targeted way, right? The awareness is important with law enforcement. They do a nice job of getting in there and making sure law enforcement understands what we're doing and why, and that's through hosting events at our stores where law enforcement shows up. They'll do like cookouts on the sidewalk and stuff like that. And you got the police coming by as they're, walking on their route, and grab a hot dog while you're here. And what's this all about? And they can explain it to them. And yeah, then when we call, or if they're in the area, most of this is in our more urban areas. And so they're typically walking around, and we flag them down. They know especially now that they see the signage, they know that they're not going to go in there for a pack of gum.
Good. Okay. Steve or Jack, you got anything else?
Where do you see going from here? So you're in 500 stores today. Where are you 2 years from now?
We'll just make the assumption that we keep having success. We'll go in more stores. I want to get to New York. We have to get to New York. There's more areas of California we've got to get into. Oakland comes to mind. That's a big pain point for us. Certainly Florida is an area that I think we need some help in. Texas as well. Those are both on my radar right now. I'm glad we're in Chicago. I would have been pushing harder for New York if I didn't have the NYPD solution already in place and it wasn't working so well. But I would love to be able to do more stores in New York with a solution. That's the problem with NYPD. They're so stinking expensive that I can only do them in so many stores before it doesn't make sense. So if I could layer in also, that's the thing, right? So if I've got 50 stores with the NYPD in them right now in New York City. If I have Alto in those stores, now I don't even need the SRTs, because if the police officer apprehends the person, we'll get the information and we're good to go. But if I can build a bigger force field around the other stores, because we've got nearly 200 stores in New York, that'd be a huge opportunity for us. So I do think we should go there next. And the relationship with the NYPD is important. That's how everything gets done there. Now, because we're in their program, they take care of us. They didn't take care of us at all before. They were bashing us in the Wall Street Journal, complaining that we're calling the police too much.
We call that marketing? from a standpoint of it's a little indirect marketing by them, which is, they did that to TD Bank not too long ago, but yeah.
Yeah. TD Bank was a customer. They couldn't pay on time. Actually, I think they are paying on time. Whole Foods couldn't pay on time.
Yeah, you would think.
What about other types of retail models? When we talk about Walgreens, it is a pretty specific type of a model. What about other retail models? Do you see it working?
I do, yeah, because I think that at the end of the day, what I consider to be the core of the deterrence factor, which is the prosecution, I think that still applies to any retailer that's having a theft issue in their stores. So I think the model it's model agnostic, to be honest. It's going to, it needs to be in areas where there's enough theft to justify the investment, and you'll have the frequency that you need to make it work. But I don't think that the retailer vertical would make a difference.
So if I already have, resources in the stores to do the apprehension, and Altos come to me and said, we want to help you with this process. And I'm a retailer that's saying, look, I already got resources in my stores and I have good relationships with law enforcement. I don't need you. What would be your layer onto that?
Are you sending your people to court to get people thrown in jail? And the answer is probably no, but maybe they are. So either way, if they say yes, then I say, well, I can save you that time. Wouldn't you rather have your store associates or your leadership be in the store? And if they say no, I would say, yeah, and I understand why, because you don't have time for that. I can help you with that. So I think that could be the missing link for the retailer if they think that they have, and you can't say what's probably true, which is you don't have as good of a relationship with law enforcement as you think you have,
Right.
Because once you get into the relationship at this level, it's a totally different level.
Right. Interesting. Okay.
But that court appearance piece is a big one in my view.
Well, and there's the power of the community too, right? That you may be taking them to court on one case, but Alto could take them to court and bring up that laundry list of those other offenses, right? So
Absolutely.
We've got a much bigger impact on the way that we're prosecuting these individuals, right?
Yeah, and from a sales perspective for somebody, if they were resisting it, or if when I talk to some folks more directly one-on-one, I would say that as an and to the prosecution piece, the community impact. I think that's a really good and. I'll help you with the prosecution, and the end result of that is your community is going to react very positively. You're going to be seen as doing something for the community, and they're going to react to that, and they're going to reward you for that.
Yeah, no, that's powerful. That's great. Okay. You guys have anything else? I think I'm good. Bill, that was awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the time with that and the insight. I think your feedback is super valuable here. So we should have some good stuff to work with right now. But obviously, if we have any other questions, we'll certainly reach out and or anything clarify or there might be a couple things we might even try to run by you too to get your feedback on as far as some of the messaging to say, yeah, that's spot on, or yeah, that's what I'd want to hear, and that kind of thing.
Sure thing. Yeah.
That'd be awesome. Cool.
No problem. Thanks.
All right, man. Appreciate it.
Have a good one.
Talk soon. Yeah, you guys too. Happy Friday.
Yeah.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Okay. Yeah, that last part was actually really, there's a great argument there, because that's one of the things that Alto has come up against, just in even not letting them hear the pitch, because they're like, yeah, I don't need it. I have relationships with law enforcement. I have resources, ORC resources already. I don't need that. That's just an extra expense. And there's a great way to combat that argument.
Agreed.
So
agreed.
Cool. All right, good. He was great.
Yep. 2 more next week, and yay.
Yep. Tuesday and then Friday. So
cool.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. We'll chat with you soon. Steve,
out.
I've got 11 o'clock with Lowe's, and then I'm good for about an hour before I record a podcast with Lisa LeBrun. So
I have a
Um,
12, so great. So call me in the afternoon.
I'll get you after that then. Okay.
All right, buddy.
All right,
Jack,
man.
have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.